September 10th, 1987. Orange Bowl Stadium, Miami, Florida. The night air hung thick with humidity, clinging to the skin of 50,000 bodies packed shoulder to shoulder in the massive open-air venue. The Bad World Tour had been underway for just 2 weeks, Michael Jackson's first solo world tour, and already it had garnered a reputation for spectacle that surpassed anything the music world had seen before. Fans had been gathering outside the stadium since dawn, their excitement charging the atmosphere with an almost tangible electricity. Inside, as the house lights dimmed for the final time, the collective intake of breath from 50,000 souls created a vacuum of anticipation, a moment suspended between what was and what was about to be. The stage stood massive and imposing against the Miami skyline, its intricate scaffolding and lighting rigs resembling some futuristic cityscape. Smoke began to billow across the platform, catching the first hints of blue and purple light. The opening synthesizer notes of "Wanna Be Startin' Something" pulsed through the stadium sound system, so powerful they seemed to vibrate in the chest cavities of every person present. And then, rising from beneath the stage, as if conjured by the music itself, appeared Michael Jackson. He stood motionless for 3 full beats, a silhouette in a white suit adorned with glittering crystals that caught and scattered the light like a constellation brought to earth. The crowd erupted, a wave of sound so overwhelming it seemed to physically push against the stage. Michael remained still, absorbing the energy, his head slightly bowed. Then, as if activated by some internal switch, he exploded into motion. Every movement was precision itself, each gesture deliberate, yet seemingly effortless. His body became an instrument of expression as fluid as his voice, which now soared over the backing track, strong and clear despite the exertion of his dancing. Backstage, unseen by the audience, stood Paul McCartney. He watched the performance with the unique perspective of someone who had experienced similar adulation in a different era. The former Beatle had arrived in Miami that morning for a charity event, unaware that his old friend and occasional collaborator was performing. A mutual acquaintance had made the connection, and Paul had accepted the invitation to observe the show from the wings. "He's extraordinary," Paul murmured to no one in particular, his British accent a contrast to the American voices of the crew members rushing around him. A nearby stage manager nodded without taking his eyes off his clipboard. "Wait till you see what's coming," he said cryptically. The concert progressed like a perfectly choreographed dream, each song flowing into the next, the energy building and receding in waves that carried the audience along a carefully crafted emotional journey. Michael's connection with the crowd was palpable. He seemed to perform not for them, but with them, creating a feedback loop of energy that transcended the traditional performer-audience dynamic. During a brief interlude, while dancers took center stage, Michael disappeared behind a curtain, using the precious moments to towel off and change into a fresh shirt, his breathing controlled despite having just completed a particularly demanding sequence. It was then that Paul approached him, extending a hand. "Magnificent show," he said warmly. "You've come a long way from that young lad I met in the 70s. Michael's face, often guarded around industry peers, broke into a genuine smile. The two men had collaborated on Say 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 and The Girl Is Mine years earlier, before Thriller had catapulted Michael into a different stratosphere of fame. There had been tensions afterward, business disagreements, the complex web of music publishing rights. But in this moment, there was only the mutual respect of 2 artists who understood each other's journey in ways few others could. "Paul," Michael said, grasping the offered hand, "I heard you might be here. Thank you for coming." A beat of silence passed between them, filled with unspoken history. Then Michael's expression shifted, a new light entering his eyes. "Would you consider joining me out there?" he asked. The question hung in the air, unexpected and momentous. Paul blinked, genuinely surprised. "Now? Tonight?" Michael nodded, the idea clearly crystallizing as he spoke. "For the encore. We could do." He paused, careful not to name a Beatles song, mindful of the complex ownership issues that had strained their relationship. Paul understood immediately and suggested a neutral alternative, a classic from the American songbook that belonged to neither of them, but that both knew well. The stage manager, overhearing, began shaking his head vigorously. "We don't have time to program the lights, the sound check. The band hasn't rehearsed." Michael raised a hand, silencing the objections with that quiet authority he possessed. "We don't need all that," he said. "Just 2 microphones and 2 spotlights. The band will follow." His tone left no room for argument. As Michael returned to the stage for the next segment, the backstage area erupted into controlled chaos. Word spread rapidly among the crew, technicians huddling to make hasty arrangements, security personnel briefed and repositioned to handle the unexpected development. Paul was quickly fitted with a wireless microphone, its frequencies checked and double-checked. The band was notified during another dance interlude, professional musicians exchanging glances of surprise and excitement before nodding their understanding. They would be ready. The audience, of course, knew none of this. They remained immersed in the spectacle before them, unaware that the unforgettable was about to give way to the impossible. The main set concluded with Billie Jean, Michael's signature performance piece. As always, the moonwalk drew gasps and screams, the audience responding as if seeing it for the first time despite its cultural ubiquity. Michael took his bow as the lights dimmed, disappearing below the stage via the same hydraulic platform that had first revealed him. The crowd roared, stomping feet, clapping hands, chanting his name in a rhythm that became its own percussion. The traditional call for an encore, an expected ritual, yet no less genuine for its predictability. Minutes passed, the chanting growing louder, more insistent. The anticipation built to nearly unbearable levels. And then, a single spotlight illuminated center stage. Michael reappeared, now dressed in a simple black jacket over a white shirt, the costume change accomplished in a brief interval. He stood before a microphone stand, an unusual sight for a performer who typically used a hands-free headset to accommodate his dancing. "Thank you, Miami," he said, his speaking voice softer than many expected, almost shy compared to his powerful singing. "You've been an incredible audience tonight." The crowd's response was deafening, a wall of sound that seemed to physically push against the stage. Michael waited for it to subside slightly before continuing. "Music has the power to bring people together," he said, "to bridge generations, cross boundaries, heal old wounds." Something in his tone caused the audience to quiet, sensing that this was more than the usual stage banter. "Tonight, I'd like to share that power with you in a special way," Michael continued. "Please welcome to the stage my friend, Sir Paul McCartney." The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. 50,000 people experiencing the same emotion simultaneously creates a force that can almost be felt physically. Shock gave way to disbelief, then to euphoria. The roar that erupted seemed to shake the very foundation of the Orange Bowl. From stage left, Paul McCartney walked into the light. Dressed casually in jeans and a simple button-down shirt, he appeared almost understated next to Michael's theatrical presence. Yet he carried himself with the easy confidence of a man who had been moving crowds since before many in the audience were born. The two icons met at center stage, embracing briefly before taking positions at their respective microphones. No elaborate introduction was needed. The band began to play, the opening notes of a classic immediately recognized by the multi-generational audience. The song choice was perfect, a piece of American musical history that transcended ownership, that belonged to the collective cultural memory. Not a Beatles song, not a Jackson track, but neutral territory where these two vastly different artists could meet as equals. Their voices blended in unexpected harmony, Paul's melodic, seasoned timbre complementing Michael's more emotional, dynamic range. They began trading verses, each bringing their distinctive style to the familiar melody. By the chorus, something remarkable was happening. All across the stadium, people began to sing along. It started sporadically, individual voices joining in from different sections, but quickly coalesced into a massive choir 50,000 strong. The sound was imperfect yet beautiful in its humanity, in its spontaneity. Michael and Paul exchanged a glance, both visibly moved by the response. As if by unspoken agreement, they stepped back from their microphones during the next chorus, allowing the audience's voices to fill the stadium. The two performers stood side by side, listening, bearing witness to the moment they had created together. A moment where past grievances and business disagreements dissolved in the face of something more powerful: the simple joy of music shared. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more authentic glimpses into Michael Jackson's life and legacy. These rare moments of genuine connection reveal the man behind the legend, the artist who understood music's power to unite across all boundaries. As the song approached its conclusion, Paul reached out and took Michael's hand, raising it high between them. The gesture was both a show of unity and an acknowledgement of Michael's status as the evening's rightful star. The audience responded with renewed vigor, the cheering reaching a crescendo that seemed to touch the Miami night sky. For the final verse, they returned to their microphones, voices joining once more, stronger for having been briefly silent. As the last notes faded, a profound moment of silence fell over the Orange Bowl. That rare, perfect stillness that sometimes occurs when thousands of people collectively recognize they have witnessed something extraordinary. Then the applause began. It was different from the excitement that had preceded it, deeper, somehow more reverential. Many were openly weeping, overcome by the unexpected convergence of musical worlds they had never imagined would intersect in their presence. Backstage, after the final bows, Michael and Paul retreated to the privacy of the main dressing room. Away from the eyes of their entourages, they spoke as only two people who have experienced the rarefied air of unprecedented fame can speak to one another. "I've missed this," Paul admitted, gesturing vaguely toward the stage they had just left. Performing without the weight of history. Just music for its own sake. Michael nodded, understanding completely. "That's all I've ever wanted," he said quietly. "For it to be about the music. Just the music." They spoke for nearly an hour, reminiscing about their earlier collaborations, sharing perspectives on the industry that had both elevated and constrained them. Before they parted, Paul removed something from his pocket, a simple black guitar pick with his initials embossed in gold. "I've carried this since our first session together," he said, pressing it into Michael's palm. "Meant to give it to you back then, but the moment never seemed right." Michael looked down at the small object, its significance far outweighing its size. He reached up and carefully unpinned the circular rhinestone brooch that had adorned his jacket throughout the encore. "Then you should have this," he said, placing it in Paul's hand. "From tonight." The exchange was brief, devoid of cameras or witnesses, yet cemented something that had begun on stage. A reconciliation, a recognition of shared experience that transcended the business conflicts that had come between them. The Miami show became legendary in the history of live performance. Bootleg recordings, circulated for years before the digital age, made sharing such moments easier. Critics and music historians would later point to it as a pivotal moment in pop culture, a passing of the torch, a bridging of musical eras, a healing of a reported rift between two icons. But for the 50,000 who were there, it was something more personal. It was the night they became part of something larger than themselves, when their voices joined with Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney to create a singular moment of harmony in a world that often seemed increasingly discordant. Years later, long after Michael's untimely death, Paul would be asked about that night during an interview. The aging rocker grew uncharacteristically quiet, his usual eloquence momentarily deserting him. "Some moments in music transcend the notes themselves," he finally said. That night in Miami wasn't about Paul McCartney or Michael Jackson. It was about what happens when music fulfills its highest purpose, bringing human beings together in a shared experience of joy. He paused, a faraway look in his eyes. "I've performed thousands of concerts in my life, but there are only a handful where something magical happened, something beyond explanation. That night with Michael was one of them. 50,000 strangers became a community for the space of one song. In a display case in Paul's studio, Alongside Beatles memorabilia and awards accumulated over decades sits a small rhinestone brooch. And in the permanent collection of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, donated after Michael's passing, a simple black guitar pick with the initials PM rests in a glass case. Small objects, ordinary in appearance, yet carrying the weight of an extraordinary moment when two musical worlds collided and, for the briefest time, merged into something greater than either could have been alone. A moment when 50,000 voices joined together, transcending the boundaries between performer and audience, celebrity and fan, past and present. A moment that lives on in the collective memory of all who were there. The night Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney reminded the world that music, at its core, has always been about bringing people together.